Hi everyone, here we are with chapter 5. We are still in part 2 of the class, Due Diligence in the Business Idea. This is the last chapter in that section. Chapter 5, we're talking about mission and strategy, which is something that we talk about a lot in business classes. And there are lots of different ways to look at it, but there are a few very consistent things that we talk about over and over again when we talk about mission statements. So let's get to it. So a mission statement, a brief statement that summarizes how and where our firm will compete. So it can be considered the mission, the vision, the strategy, goal, simple rule, statement of purpose that goes by all these different terms. But essentially what it is that it's a roadmap. It's telling you and your employees and your public, customers, clients, suppliers, media, government, anyone who's from the outside, who you are and what you're trying to do. It should be, to a certain extent, be your brand. The important thing is that it's a brief, concise statement. That's super important because you want to be able to have people talk about it, in a quick conversation. Say what your mission is so it's easily understood. And also in that process of distilling it down to something simple, it helps you to better clarify what it is that you are doing as well. It also has to be something that's very well understood. So in the process of determining what your mission is going to be, some of the things you're going to think about are what your capabilities are. So what is it that your firm is capable of doing? Are you a food company? Are you a financial services company? Are you furniture makers? Are you clothing manufacturers? Are you clothing sellers? Are you fashion stylists? Who are you? What are the key aspects? So you need to know also this idea of what your sustainable competitive advantage is, that the mission statement and your sustainable competitive advantage really should be completely linked to each other, solidly linked to each other. We talked about sustainable advantage or competitive advantage earlier. Competitive advantage is the idea, what is it that you do that's better than your competition? Are you quicker? Are you more efficient? Are you, do you have better pricing? Are you more responsive? Do you offer one specific kind of technique or item that they don't offer, that kind of thing. So you really need to know, and sustainable, you need to be able to keep that going for quite a few years so that there's some kind of brand loyalty and brand trust. All right, so some of the things that you want to keep in mind when we're talking about designing a mission statement are, this idea is keep it short, make sure it can fit on a coffee mug, keep it simple, ensure that everyone in the company can learn and understand what it means and why. Make it applicable. The mission statement should be able to guide every individual in the company each and every day. And it should also be something that customers cite as to why they use the company. So it's kind of like what I was talking about before. Be specific. Be so clear that it tells everyone exactly what you do and by definition what you do not do. So if you are a fast food restaurant, that means you would not fine dining. If you are an Italian restaurant, it doesn't mean that you sell Cajun food. Okay, and that also establish measurable goals. So be able to develop a metric for every part of the statement. So I'm going to go through and talk about these one by one, even more so than I just have. So to keep it short, understandable and memorable. It has to speak to customers. People have to understand what it means. People have to be able to respond to it. It can't just be something that slips out of your mind. And this is, it seems, believe me, and I understand that this sounds a lot easier than I know that it is. So it's something that you spend a lot of time with, kind of kick it around. It might take you a couple weeks, a month or so. But all of these things, this isn't necessarily a linear process. The things we're talking about in this chapter, that also should have happened concurrently. It's all part of coming up with a plan and thinking about your business and redefining things. And the more you think about it, the more it'll make sense to you. So anyway, understandable and memorable. And then short and direct. So something that guides the organization every day. It's a roadmap. The mission and the strategy and the planning, these are all roadmaps to help you get to where you want to go. And should be clear, succinct, widely known by everybody in the firm. so that everyone knows what it is. Okay, keep it simple. So if it's too complex, you're not going to share it. And if you can't share it, then what's the point of having it? So you want to make sure it's simple, direct, appropriate. And you want to make sure that people can understand it, and it should have a clear meaning. It should not be too wordy. There shouldn't be too many too many adjectives, too much descriptive language. Just short and to the point. Not quite necessarily curt, but short and to the point. Make it applicable. So the mission should really help employees towards reach the goals. And it's whatever the goals are that the owner has decided or the top leadership has decided. People should be able to understand that, not just the employees, but also your vendors and any other people who are working with you, any other kind of marketing intermediaries you may have, financial intermediaries. People should understand it. And then also that it helps everyone moving in the right direction. So there might be some variance. There won't be any decisions made that are counter to what the founder of the new business wants to achieve. So that's the idea of applicability. Okay, be specific. In order to accomplish the 3 keys for mission statements that we've talked about already, it's really necessary that the mission statement be so specific that it clearly also tells everyone what not to do. The example I was talking earlier about the restaurant, the text talks about the gourmet Mediterranean meal experience in the heart of the city. So when you go through, you know that if it's gourmet, it's not fast food or it's not processed food. Mediterranean, meaning it's not South American, it's not Asian food, it's not Cajun food, it's not California cuisine, it's Mediterranean. And where it is, that it's in the heart of the city, so that that it's downtown. So it helps to keep you, again, that kind of helps keep you on track to a certain extent. So be as specific as possible. So it tells people what to do, and then by virtue of that, what the people should not do. Okay, so establish measurable goals. Measurable goals are something that we talk about a lot when we talk about mission statements and strategy and planning. And if you have a plan, how are you going to know if you get there unless you measure? So if you're going on a trip, I always like to relate this to if you're going on a trip. If you're going on a trip, your goal is to drive 200 miles a day. If you're going on a trip and you we're going on a trip and we're going to go to XYZ destination, we're going to go to Nashville, Tennessee. Well, is it to go X number of miles a day? You're going to go 200 miles a day. You're going to go 50 miles a day. How long will it take you to get there? How much money are you going to spend? So you don't really know if you're achieving what you wanted to achieve unless you have some sort of outline and metrics meaning numbers to measure it against. So you're interested in quantitative measures and qualitative measures. So quantitative measures are those that are tied to the financial or strategic goals of the organization, and they're really very easily measured. Qualitative measures are more that are tied to strategic goals of the organization and have more to do with the feel of the organization. So positive corporate culture or brand awareness or employee satisfaction, that kind of thing. So one, if you want to go back to the gourmet restaurant, some of their mission statements, you could say number of chefs who've graduated from gourmet schools or cooking schools, a rank in the annual Zagat listings or other types of, your Yelp listing, whatever, and the quality of the reviews in the papers. So, the quality of reviews would be more of a qualitative measure than a quantitative measure. And also with, to the trip, how much fun people had, how well people got along, that kind of thing. Okay, moving on. Mission statement, continuing. So the other thing too is about the mission statement is it helps you to guide activities of the firm. So advertising. So if you, for example, we'll go back to the Mediterranean restaurant. If you have the Mediterranean downtown restaurant, and I also talk in the book about a Greek restaurant. If you have a reservation, if you have a restaurant downtown and you know people aren't necessarily going to travel from very far, you're not going to advertise for a restaurant, not travel far for a restaurant. You're not going to advertise in a publication that's only in the suburban and rural areas. You're going to advertise in publications that are in or in areas that people who spend time in the urban area view. And the location, it says in the heart of the city, so that has to be, it's not going to be on a rural country road. It's going to be someplace downtown. And then also the type of staff you're going to have. So if it's a gourmet food and it's a Mediterranean bent, there are people who specialize in those areas, wine experts and food expert chefs and that kind of thing that specialize in that area. So, and then in some instances, location might not matter to a certain extent. If you're, if you have an online business, location might not matter. Okay, so let's talk more about mission statement. So founders also have to be clear about where and how they're going to compete. So they should help to be clearly they have to clearly specify which market the firm's going to compete in some cases how broad a geographic range the firm's going to serve, and the major ways in which it will compete. So, and the thing is that if these are not precisely defined, the new owners might find themselves building an entity that in some way is targeted to one business and in other ways targeted to another, related but inconsistent business. So again, this whole idea of having everybody moving in the same direction towards the same group of customers is going to provide a lot of benefit. So yeah, it's the old adage of everybody rowing in the same direction, everyone singing the same camp song. Okay, so sustainable competitive advantage. Again, it's sustainable competitive advantage. It's an advantage that others cannot immediately copy. So it's something that you think you can hang on to for long term. So it is, as I said, important for long-term success. We talked a little bit about competitive advantage in Chapter 4, and it's just this idea that how your firm or a firm performs better than anybody else in the market that it serves. Okay, so more about sustainable competitive advantage. So eventually all competitive advantages disappear because industries change and the external environment changes and cultural expectations change and customers change and all that kind of thing. So you want to think about that. And you also, this idea of building relationships with people, we're going to talk more about it when we talk about marketing, but you need to know how you're going to create value for your customers and build strong relationships with them. And once you have the strong relationship, you're going to know how you can build that value, create that value, and that should be your competitive advantage. So and that's another thing, developing relationships with people makes a big difference, that personal touch. And it doesn't necessarily, we see it in small businesses, and then online businesses have figured out ways to do that electronically. It's maybe not the same as having a face-to-face. It's definitely not the same. But, for example, when you look at Amazon and they say, you bought this, people who bought this also bought this, or because you bought this, you might be interested in this. So it's a way to develop some kind of relationship with them. But that's really what you're looking for, is trying to figure out what your competitive advantage is. And then once you know what it is, you need to establish it before you start into your business. What is it that you're going to do better, and where you're going to continue to do better and work at doing better. So what you want to do is look at your business assets. So capabilities, it could be a patent, it could be people, it could be a location. And then you want to look at what's standard and what's unique. This is not too dissimilar to what we were talking about previously about customer relationships. So anyway, we want to figure out what your assets are. So standard and unique. What is it that, like, the minimum you need to reach, and then what is it that you do that's extra special? And then you really need to evaluate those unique, whatever those unique resources and capabilities are. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about that. So with your assets and capabilities, tangible assets, which are hard assets such as equipment, location, and then intangible assets, things that aren't necessarily physical but critical success. So relationships, again, a patent or some sort of system or that kind of thing. And you can go on and on about this, but it's something to really keep in mind. What is it that you're going for you? So let's take a look. This is a table straight from the textbook. Some examples of tangible and intangible assets. Your location, your equipment, financing, inventory, that kind of thing. And then intangible assets, experience, contacts, your educational background, unique knowledge, branding, skill set, that kind of thing. All right, so you have to split the list into standard and unique. So standard is basically what everybody does. Office, computer systems, telephones, that kind of thing. And then other things that might be standard for the industry, customer service, maybe if everyone expects customer service. If people expect two-day delivery or they don't expect two-day delivery, that may or may not be standard. So you want to think about that. Okay, and then other competitive advantage, this idea of first mover advantage. First mover advantage is this idea that you are the first one to offer some sort of special item. If you go think about the restaurant business, maybe you're the first restaurant in the area to offer a purely vegan menu or vegan options, and then everybody else would be a follower. So if you're the first ones to I don't know, I keep on talking about delivery, but free delivery. If you're the first one to offer valet parking, whatever it may be. And then you want to build a competitive advantage. And again, we talked about, it could be a variety of different things. And it really, what the competitive advantage is depends really in many ways, depends greatly on what your industry is. So then you want to evaluate how competitive are your unique resources. So once you know what the resources or capabilities that your new business might have that appear to be unique, you'll need to examine each before you can claim any of these as a source of competitive advantage. So how good really are you? And this is something that's hard. It's hard for people to look at themselves objectively, but objectivity is super important when you're in business, because even though you might see something in a certain way, doesn't mean all your customers are going to see something in a certain way. Sometimes it's good to get feedback from others, honest feedback, and be willing to accept that honest feedback. Okay, so economic rents seems like a strange term, doesn't it? So economic rents, this idea that it's the financial gains that you get from some sort of capability, asset or capability that is outside the norm for the industry. That's really kind of in a nutshell. So economic rent implies that the new business not only matches the norms for the industry, but in several areas far exceeds the industry in a manner that allows it to charge well in excess of its additional costs. So you can think of a business that maybe charges a little bit more, but it's because they offer so much more service than other places. Okay, so you also want to look at, in terms of your resources, like any resource you have, is the resource you have rare? Is the location rare? Is the patent rare? That kind of thing. Is it easily substituted? Can someone else do it or find it someplace else in the area? Is it durable? Is it going to last a long time? Is it valuable? These are a lot of things that build on what we talked about in Chapter 4. Okay, so here we go. You could take a look at, this is a nice chart. I always think charts are a really nice way to look at things and understand things a little bit more. So let's look at for example, the durability one. You can say, can a firm match it within days, months, years? Do they have the financial means to do it? Do they seem to care about what you're offering? How are they feeling about it? So you have to think about the time lag between the introduction of the competitive advantage and the point where competitors can match your advantage in the window where new businesses can earn unique returns. So in some industries, for example, a competitive advantage will last only a few months, whereas in other industries, an advantage might last a long time as competitors are slow to adapt. So you can think, can a competitor easily copy it? If it can be copied, how perfectly can it be imitated, and how long will it take? So you think about durability. So you could go through and really talk about all of them that way. Do few firms have it? That's that kind of thing. Substitutability is, speaks to the uniqueness of it. Okay. So strategy one, we'll talk about variety of different strategies. Broad approaches to small business is going to accomplish its mission. So the firm strategy is how the firm plans to use the competitive advantage of the business to accomplish its mission. So the mission, in many ways, is the foundation of the firm on which the firm strategy is built. All right, and then talk about this Michael Porter in the book, in the text. So there are sort of three broad strategies that can be combined: low cost, differentiation, and focus. So the idea of low cost is just that, differentiation. How different are you from your competitors? How different is your product? We talk about, in marketing, we talk about positioning and differentiation. Where are you going to be positioned? Are you the high-end luxury brand? Are you, what are you? And then once you're in that grouping, how are you going to be different from other people who are in that grouping? And then the idea of focus is that how focused are you? How focused are you with your customer base? All right. So now let's talk about developing strategy. So we've talked about this. The mission statement specifies where and how the firm is to compete. And secondly, then the strategic plan should show capability. Showing capabilities is used to meet each part of the mission and strategy. So, downtown restaurant, you're a gourmet restaurant. You have Mediterranean food. You're in the heart of the city. So you can break it down. Strategy needs to meet the criterion of being defendable for some length of time and provide above average economic returns above the industry average. So this is a good not only for today, but also for the next 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road. So you need to make sure it's something that is sustainable, that you can sustain it, and also that will continue to bring revenue in. And then finally, it needs to be constantly reevaluated. It's, as we talked about earlier, and we talked about in other classes, no businesses, nothing exists in a bubble. And things are constantly changing in the outside world. And one thing that's super important is that we can adapt to those changes and respond to those changes. We talked about the lean organization. You have to be, fight and wait kind of, you have to be flexible. You have to be nimble. You have to be able to move along and realize when things are going to change, when things might change that you have no control over, and how you're going to be able to respond to them. And you have to be willing to respond to them. You can't just dig your heels in and say, nope, this is how I'm doing it. I don't care what my customers think. I'm going to tell them what they want. That's not always going to work. So this idea of constantly reevaluating, is your strategy working? Can you take it in a different direction? So being humble and open is a super important quality of people. Humble, open, and open to feedback is a really important quality to people who are in small business owners and entrepreneurs. Okay, so here we go. This is the what we were talking about. What I was talking about a minute ago is that the mission, gourmet, strategy, high-end, well-known chefs. So the action would be to hire a chef from a top school. That recognized, as a consequence of that, you have to be recognized in the community and perhaps get some good media coverage. And who's responsible for it? The founder. And then the status, done, not done. So it just gives you an idea of what we're talking about. So it's important that you implement a strategy that's going to fit in line with the business. and they have to be built on a consistent set of activities around the mission and the strategy. So consistency really helps to focus the business on its strengths, and it gives the best opportunity to make economic rents, which we talked about earlier. And it also doesn't confuse your message to your customers, because there are so many businesses out there, and it's easy to get things mixed up. And it's, people want to have a clear, concise idea about what's going on. This idea of the elevator speech, the tagline, whatever, people need to understand, and they need to consistently receive those benefits from you that you talked about in your mission statement. Okay, so a little chapter review here. We talked about mission statement and designing them and their impact on business. And then we focused on the 3 steps to identify a sustainable competitive advantage. And then we talked about developing an effective strategy and applying the strategy. Okay, so that wraps up chapter 5 and the first part of the class. We'll be back later with the second part of the class, where we'll get into a little bit more detail, talk about finance and marketing and human resources and all that kind of thing. Okay, but for now, focus on just these first 5 chapters. All right, thanks, guys.